Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to Utility Sports. Before we jump into today's video, we are just going to be making you guys aware of a jersey giveaway we are doing here on the channel at Utility Sports. This is the first ever jersey giveaway we have ever done, and it is a Trevor Lawrence Jacksonville Jaguars edition jersey, never been worn, brand new jersey, and we're going to be giving it away, number 16 jersey for you guys. All you have to do to be entered into this giveaway is leave a comment on today's video. Could be anything ranging from jersey giveaway or just your thoughts on the video itself. And you also have to be subscribed to be entered into the giveaway here. Make sure you go ahead and do both of those things right now before we jump into the video. Best of luck in the jersey giveaway. We're a very small channel yet, so chances are if you hit that subscribe button and comment, very likely could be you walking away with a brand new Trevor Lawrence Jacksonville Jaguars jersey. So best of luck, guys, and now let's jump into today's video. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And in today's video, we're going to be actually doing our first 2-round mock draft. We've been doing a whole bunch of mock drafts here on the channel, rounds 1 and rounds 2. But this time, we are putting rounds 1 and 2 together in this video. So it might be a little bit longer of a video here. But then this way, it's all right here in this one video for you guys. So let's jump into it. And we are actually going to be mocking what we think will happen, not necessarily what we would do. So if you don't like a player that we mock, we necessarily don't like that player either. As a fit there, we're just saying that that's what we think will happen. And with that being the case, the Jacksonville Jaguars here at pick 1, they're going to go with Trevor Lawrence. That is the far and away most obvious selection here in this NFL draft. That is the surefire number 1 pick. Number 2 becomes a little bit more of a pivot point. Isn't that right, Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we will see the New York Jets go with Zach Wilson. There's a lot of questions surrounding Sam Darnold and the future there in New York. I think that Joe Douglas will want a fresh start with his own quarterback that he drafts, because let's remember, he was not a part of that draft that they ended up selecting Sam Darnold, but they get their guy Zach Wilson, a mobile quarterback, a guy that was pretty accurate at his time at BYU. Big reason why they won a ton of football games this year. And this is the most relevant they've been in quite some time. So a lot of that success can be attributed to Zach Wilson. I think the Jets are getting a pretty good one there at 2.
Yeah, Zach Wilson now is the second QB off the board already at pick 2. This class, there's could be some QBs flying off the board pretty early on. I've got the Miami Dolphins here now at 3. And this, again, is one of those pivot points in the draft where if they make a certain decision, it could really impact how the draft goes for them. I'm going to opt for Penei Sewell at this point. I think that they're going to prioritize Tua Tagovailoa's health and protecting him in the pocket, allowing him time in the pocket to pass it across the middle of the field often in that offense. They're going to have to look to retool around him a little bit, but Penei Sewell is a great starting point for them at pick 3. Moving into pick 4, we got the Atlanta Falcons, Austin. Again, another team here. I think the top 5 is a little bit shaky with how the board could fall for them. Where do you see Atlanta going if they do not trade down?
Personally, I think they are going to select Justin Fields, the Georgia kid. He obviously grew up in Georgia, committed to Georgia, played there a little bit, ended up transferring to Ohio State. But I think personally they are ready to move on from the whole Matt Ryan era. And I think that kind of begins this season where they'll select Justin Fields to let Matt Ryan play the whole year. They'll give Justin Fields 1 year to sit because I think that really would benefit him by having that year to ultimately sit. But for me, Atlanta is definitely going to look at that quarterback position. We also could see an edge, but I think 4 is a little too high for an edge. Once again, this could be a trade down opportunity. We are not doing trade downs in this mock draft.
Right. And the nice thing here with 4, we get a nice little homecoming story with Justin Fields. You had mentioned him returning back to Georgia now, the state of Georgia. And I think this works out well for the Falcons. There's not really a specific direction that they should go at pick 4 if they can't get a trade down to work. I think getting a long-term QB behind Matt Ryan to really take over that franchise does make a lot of sense. At pick 5 now, if I'm running the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm pretty happy here because I get my choice of the wide receivers. Obviously, Penei Sewell would be one of the guys on the top of my board with what I'd be looking to do to protect Joe Burrow. But with him off the board here, I'm actually going to opt for Ja'Marr Chase. The LSU product has worked with Joe Burrow in the past, connected for over 20 touchdowns the season of 2019 when they won the national title game. And he's going to be a dynamic weapon for them on the outside. Him and T. Higgins could be a really good 1-2 punch for Joe Burrow. We saw T. Higgins play very well his rookie year when Joe Burrow was the quarterback. I think that Ja'Marr Chase makes that receiving room even better as they look to move on from A.J. Green and take that franchise in a different direction. Pick 6, now we have the Philadelphia Eagles, and wide receiver, probably another big looking point for them in Philadelphia. Austin, which way do you see the Eagles really going at 6?
I see them going with the Heisman winner, Devontae Smith, just considering that I think he is the second best receiver in the draft. But something that's a little noteworthy, looking at some of the statistics when Waddle and Devontae Smith played on the field at the same exact time. I mean, Devontae Smith was the second best receiver during the time that they played together, but obviously he took a really, really big step forward this season, just considering that he did not have Waddle in the offense. And I think obviously the Eagles are going to need some more weapons. They got to reload. They're going to be letting go of some receivers, and you obviously have to refill that position and put Jalen Hurts in the best position ultimately to succeed.
Yeah, Philadelphia is quite an intriguing spot at the moment. They just moved on from Carson Wentz. They picked up a third-round pick this year, second-round pick next year. That could be conditionally a first-round pick. Looks like a longer-term rebuild there maybe for Philadelphia around quarterback Jalen Hurts. QB, I don't think is out of the question, though, for them. Do you think that there's any chance that they are doing their study and homework right now on QBs in this class?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they are ultimately looking to see if there's a guy that potentially falls. You never know if a Justin Fields is very possible. He could slide to 6 or even further down the board. But I think that Philly could be a landing spot potentially. I don't see it going that way, but that is something that we do need to monitor as this progresses.
Yeah, definitely. And now at 7, I got the Detroit Lions, another team that's going to be doing their homework on the quarterback position, even though they just brought in Jared Goff. I know his contract isn't the most conducive to move on from right now. They're paying him a hefty amount based on what the Rams gave him in his extension. But at 7, you're either looking at a wide receiver, someone who he can throw the football to, or you're looking at that QB position. And I'm actually going to opt to go quarterback Trey Lance here out of NDSU. My reasoning why is I think that at some point they are going to actually be able to move on from Jared Goff a year or two down the road. And then that gives Trey Lance some time to adjust his game to the NFL. He gets to come in, develop, learn the new offense there under head coach Dan Campbell, and really adjust to NFL football while Jared Goff, kind of takes some of the lumps of this team not really being ready to be a real contender at this point, a team that's going to be not as competitive as some of these other teams in the NFL. And I think Trey Lance then gets an opportunity to take his time. They have a lot of assets moving forward, and then they could build this thing around Trey Lance in the future. Austin, at pick 8, you've got the Carolina Panthers here, a team that's also looking at QBs. We have a video up on the channel about them and their interest in Deshaun Watson. Which way do you see the Panthers going if they do not move on from pick 8?
Yeah, if they end up not moving on from that selection, I think they're going to go, obviously, the best player available. I think that is Kyle Pitts from the University of Florida. Obviously, I think they have a big need at that tight end spot, and a lot of people need to realize that Carolina will be likely looking for that best player available. We could see them also go defense. That's very possible, but I think that ultimately, whoever your next quarterback is, you need to have the building blocks ready for them. Obviously, they have Christian McCaffrey. They have 2 really, really nice wideouts as well. So you want to add to that tight end room, and obviously Kyle Pitts could be a top 5 player in the entire draft when it's all said and done. But for Carolina, I think they're getting a really, really good player here at 8.
Yeah, talk about a dynamic playmaker. Carolina's bringing in Pitts, a guy who can play out wide, can play out of the slot, can play off the line of scrimmage at that natural tight end position. Sure, he's not going to be the greatest blocker you're going to draft out of college at that tight end spot, but he's going to be a real weapon regardless of who is throwing the football there in Carolina. I love that fit a lot. Now at 9, I've got the Denver Broncos. And this team, they've been up and down in a lot of different ways. You're looking at cornerback and edge as the 2 real positions. Sounds like Von Miller is not going to be a Denver Bronco next year and that they are declining his team option that they had on him to bring him back. So at this point, I'm really looking between those 2 spots, but I'm actually going to opt for Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech. He's still learning the position a little bit, but I think he's got real man-to-man cover skills. I think he's a guy who could grow into that position, be a real true number 1 cornerback in the NFL. And here at pick 9, they're taking his potential there. Maybe less of a sure thing as Patrick Surtain at this point, but he's a guy who can possibly be a higher-end potential product and would fit nicely into Vic Fangio's defense.
Absolutely. Now at pick 10, we have the Dallas Cowboys, and we have to consider that cornerback spot. We've been talking about it all year long, that need to fix that secondary, and I think the most important thing for them is getting another outside corner. We will go with Patrick Surtain the second, just considering that I think he's arguably the best corner in the draft. Maybe he's number 2. There's a lot of different teams that, there's a lot of varying opinions on these corners. I do think that Dallas would be happy to see him there at 10, but I think they're going to be pretty set on taking a corner. We have to obviously monitor the Dak Prescott situation. I think that will be a franchise tag ultimately for Dallas. So I think they have to continue to work on that defense a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be about replacing Byron Jones, who left last year in free agency. They've also got some other questions about that secondary safety position. Xavier Woods, his contract status is up in question at the moment as well. So it's going to be looking about trying to, get younger in that secondary and really improve the talent there as well. I don't think that they had a great showing in 2020, but in 2021, they have the makings to really improve this team in a lot of different ways. The New York Giants now at pick 11 are probably pretty ecstatic with how the board fell. Carolina Panthers didn't look at Jalen Waddle. The Detroit Lions opted to go quarterback here in this mock draft. So Jalen Waddle is still on the board, and that is the direction I would see them going with how the board has fallen. He's a dynamic wide receiver, brings good speed, good quick twitch muscles. He's a guy who's going to be able to create separation off the line of scrimmage as well and work across the middle of the field, something that they badly need there in New York. Darius Slayton obviously provides a guy who can work outside of the numbers a little bit, but they need another guy who's going to help Daniel Jones develop as a quarterback, and I love Jalen Waddle's fit there in New York.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful fit there with Jalen Waddle going to the New York Giants. But now we're sitting at an interesting position here with the San Francisco 49ers because they're going to desperately be looking for a corner. And is there a possible guy here for them? I think there is. J.C. Horn will continue to work up boards. He has been doing it all year long. I think he is the selection. Why? Richard Sherman's on his way out. They want to really ensure a little bit of an insurance policy for them at that cornerback spot. Could be that man-to-man guy that they're looking for potentially. This San Francisco defense is going to be going through a little bit of changes, just considering that Robert Saleh's gone, Richard Sherman's gone. Those are true building blocks that they've had on that defense. Obviously, Robert Saleh being the coach, but he has a lot to do week to week for how well they perform. So ultimately, I do think they will look at that cornerback spot.
Yeah, I really love that. The pairing of that great defensive line that they already have established there in San Fran with a guy who can come in, be a true man-to-man cover corner for them. I like that pairing a lot because you're making the offense really work to try and create separation off the line of scrimmage, and you have a great pass rush to get home after QBs. That is a good combination to have moving forward for San Francisco. At pick 13, we're looking at the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think, again, this team, the mock draft board couldn't fall better for them. Rashaan Slater is still here on the board. They badly need to address the left tackle position. And Austin, I know how high you are on Rashaan Slater. Tell our viewers a little bit about what you see in him as a prospect.
I think he's arguably the best pass blocking offensive lineman in the entire class. I mean, he does a really, really good job at extending his arms. And obviously he wins matchups with guys that have even longer arms than him, which is really impressive. Really knows how to work inside the pads. Obviously he pushes the limit of holding to where he doesn't get penalties called on him. That's what I think is really important with a lot of offensive linemen is knowing how far to be able to push the boundaries of a holding call without being called for holding. So for me personally, I think Rashaan Slater is absolutely great. But now I want to move to pick 14 because I'm really excited about this selection. I'm going to have Micah Parsons go to the Minnesota Vikings. Eric Wilson will be replaced. He's obviously in his contract season. I think Micah Parsons steps in and is an ultimate competitor on that Minnesota Vikings defense. I think that this is a wonderful fit with this Vikings team. You're going to have arguably the best linebacking core in the entire league with this trio of Barr, Kendricks, and now Micah Parsons. Mike Zimmer's going to be looking defense, and I think Micah Parsons could be the pick.
Yeah, I really like that. That's the first on our channel here, the first time we see Micah Parsons going at pick 14 to the Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings are known for having a really good linebacker duo in Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr. Why not add another one? They run a lot of 3 linebacker sets. Eric Wilson, like you had mentioned, had been a big part of that. He is not going to be back next year more than likely. Micah Parsons comes in, and you're looking at the best linebacker group in the NFL then, in my opinion, with that addition. I really like that for the Minnesota Vikings. At 15, I got the New England Patriots here, and this is one of those bigger spots in the draft that I'm not exactly sure which way they would look to go here. Tight ends off the board with Kyle Pitts no longer there. I think this is a little too early for Pat Freiermuth. The top 3 wide receivers are off the board, but I actually don't think that stops the New England Patriots here from looking at that wide receiver spot and opting for Kadarius Toney out of Florida. He's going to be a guy that continues to work his way up boards as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. He's an extremely electric wide receiver, someone who can work with speed across the middle of the field, can get yards after the catch, and that's going to be something really important there in New England. They're lacking some dynamism in that offense. They're lacking guys who can create separation off the line of scrimmage and can function as a deep threat. Kadarius Toney does all of that for you and more there in New England. This is the highest we've seen him go in our mock draft, but I think he's going to continue flying up boards as we get closer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Kadarius Toney is one of the more underrated prospects. Now he's starting to finally get into that first-round conversation and maybe even middle of the first round. Obviously, this is going to be one of the highest you see Kadarius Toney go, but he's a dynamic playmaker. And I think New England, historically, if we look at Josh McDaniels and those teams, they've always had a really, really good slot wide receiver. Julian Edelman is getting old. I think that is his eventual replacement. Kadarius Toney is going to be dangerous for the New England Patriots. Then we move on to 16 with Arizona. Arizona presents an interesting roster formation, just considering that I'm not exactly sure what direction they're going to go, because 15 was another one of those spots there with New England. We have no idea where they're going to go. I think now where the quarterback room sits ultimately for Arizona, I think they might opt to wait another round. They're going to be looking at edge at this point. Kwity Paye is the selection for me. I think that obviously you have to replace Marcus Golden, and by doing that, you have Kwity Paye, who eventually could be that true building block on the defensive line for the Cardinals. There's a lot of different ways that they can go, but just judging off of value and who's available right now, I think they would look at that edge spot.
Right, we see the first edge now off the board at pick 16, the last pick of the middle of the first round here. And the reasoning for that makes a lot of sense. They need to add in an edge. He's an athletic monster. I think he fits in pretty well there in Arizona. But like you mentioned, I think this is a real trade down situation for a team that maybe would want to move up, grab a specific guy. Arizona is going to be a team to watch when it comes to some of the rumors right before the NFL draft on trades. At pick 17, I got the Las Vegas Raiders here, and there's one guy that really sticks out to me now at this point. That's Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He has been a staple here to the Las Vegas Raiders in some of our mock drafts. He is a really solid linebacker. He's very fundamentally sound, can go sideline to sideline, is a real playmaker, has good awareness, reads plays quickly, and I think he's going to fit right into that Vegas Raiders defense. Now, the question is, yes, they did go and pay some guys in free agency last offseason, Corey Littleton being one of those guys. Are Mike Mayock and John Gruden willing to admit that they need to improve there yet, despite spending that money in free agency? I think that they are. This fits their draft history. They like to draft from winning programs, and Owusu-Koramoah fits all of those boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. On pick 18 now, we have the Miami Dolphins. Just considering where the board has fallen, I think it's very possible that we do see them go on the offensive side of the football again. I think Zaven Collins is also a name that we could look here, but for me, I think they are going to go with Rashad Bateman. I know a lot of these Dolphin fans that are in our comment sections constantly saying that Rashad Bateman's not going to work there. I think he can coexist in an offense with Devontae Parker. Those two guys on the outside could be a really dangerous pairing for years to come. And I think that would be awesome for Tua to have those two dynamic playmakers. And that's not to say they could come back in the second round and take a really, really good running back as well.
Right. And the one thing, too, about Miami here is you don't necessarily need an elite burner to have success after the catch. And you need someone who's going to create separation. And that can be through route running as well. Think about Jakeem Grant. He's one of the fastest receivers in the NFL, but he hasn't necessarily been the most producing wide receiver there. He's actually struggled to be a production guy despite being one of the fastest players in the NFL. Speed does not trump everything, especially at that wide receiver position. Guys like Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, who are maybe not burners, but can get off the line of scrimmage with their routes, their footwork. That's what Rashad Bateman could possibly bring here in Miami, and there's a lot of value in that for Tua Tagovailoa at the quarterback position. At pick 19, I've got the Washington football team here, and this is one of those teams that's going to be looking maybe quarterback, maybe tackle, and I'm actually going to go with the QB position at this point. I'm going to opt for Mac Jones. I don't see it very likely that Alex Smith comes back on the contract he's on at this point. I think that they're going to restructure with him. Yes, they brought back Taylor Heineke, but that was on a very low-level deal. Mac Jones is going to be a guy who's given the opportunity to develop into their long-term starter. This is the highest we've seen Mac Jones go in one of our mock draft videos at this point, and I think that Washington could be a good sticking point for him.
Absolutely. I think Mac Jones is going to continue to gain traction amongst a lot of mock drafts. Obviously, he's really riding high off of the national championship, but for Mac Jones personally, I do see him being a first-round pick and possibly top 20. It really depends on how Chicago and Washington feel about him, because I don't see him really going before that. Unless New England kind of gets a wild hair, they're never scared to take outside of what's deemed value in the NFL draft. They're a possible landing spot, but I don't see that entirely likely. Now with the Bears here at 20, I think it's pretty clear and obvious they're going to take Samuel Cosmi out of the University of Texas. They really need to address the tackle spot, just considering their offensive line is kind of a mess right now. They're going to continue to build that O-line for whoever the quarterback is. I think it's very, very likely that they leverage a trade in the trade market, possibly go get a guy like Sam Darnold, considering Sam Darnold will be on his way out with the Jets selection that we had in Zach Wilson. I do see this happening for the Bears.
Right, the Bears do have that question mark at QB, but I think the tackle position is the most needed spot for them at this point. And the team that just solved their QB situation was the Indianapolis Colts, made a move for Carson Wentz via trade with the Philadelphia Eagles. And now it's going to be about protecting him, and none other than Christian Darrisaw still on the board here. That is a perfect fit for GM Chris Ballard. Anthony Costanzo is a likely retirement this offseason. He's coming back from an ankle injury there. He actually had a tendon issue in his ankle that sidelined him for the remainder of the 2020 season after sustaining that injury. And it just sounds like he's not going to be back. So it's going to be about addressing that left tackle position for them moving forward. And Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech is going to be the guy to do so.
Yeah, I think it's O-line or bust for Indianapolis in the first round. I definitely see them looking at a guy like Darrisaw very seriously with the 21st pick. At pick 22, we have their division rival, the Tennessee Titans. I think they're going to look along the defensive line. Me personally, I think they're going to go with a high upside guy in Gregory Rousseau. I know a lot of people are, pretty low on him now, considering he was, before this season considered a top 5 draft pick. Now he's fallen all the way to, that 22 spot and possibly even lower. But I'm still a believer in him and his ability. I just think that it's going to take the right playoff team to help unlock his potential. For me personally, I think that's Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee could be quite scary bringing in a guy like Rousseau, who maybe has that top 5, top 10 potential in this class. He just has to grow into it, add a few pass rush moves into his arsenal, and he could be a really dangerous prospect moving forward. At 23, I've got my New York Jets now. You grab Zach Wilson for them at pick 2 here in this mock draft. And now I'm looking at ways that I can improve this football team even more. Wide receiver, a really big question mark for them. However, I'm going to actually opt for Najee Harris at this point with how the board's fallen. I think that he is the most likely consistent playmaker on the board. I think he's a guy who's going to be able to elevate the Jets offense. Now, are they going to be able to address some of the offensive line question marks via free agency this offseason? Who knows quite yet. I hope that they're able to bring in at least one guard to help the interior of our offensive line, but I think Najee Harris is a can't-miss guy here at pick 23.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a really, really good selection, and that's actually going to kind of take away from my pick 24. I was definitely hoping Najee Harris was going to be there, and I think the Pittsburgh Steelers were as well. I'm not exactly sure if they're super sold on Travis Etienne. I've heard a little bit of reports that they do prefer a guy like Najee Harris, just considering he might be the better fit. But ultimately, I think they are going to look at that offensive tackle spot. Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame will be the selection, just considering that I think Pittsburgh wants to continue to build that offensive line. We're not sure the status on Big Ben, but they do need to have an insurance policy at that tackle spot. Really good teams down here build great offensive lines. If we look at some of the teams that we've had, like Indianapolis playoff team, Tennessee playoff team, and now Pittsburgh, they all have really good offensive lines. And if we continue looking further down the line at the other playoff teams, really there's not one playoff team that has an atrocious offensive line. Yes, Kansas City had some issues in the Super Bowl, but they were going against Tampa. I don't think that, these playoff teams are going to let, either injuries or free agency destroy their O-line. They're going to replace, and they're going to continue to protect their franchise quarterback up front.
Right. It's all about making rotations there on that offensive line and ensuring that you are going to be protecting your quarterback and also helping your running back in the run game moving forward. And that's exactly what I'm going to be looking to do here at pick 25 with the Jacksonville Jaguars. James Robinson emerged this past year as a near Pro Bowl running back. I think probably a Pro Bowl snub if we're being completely honest. Also, they just grabbed Trevor Lawrence at pick number 1, so it's going to be about helping those two individuals, and that's Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC. I actually think he's about the 3rd or 4th best offensive lineman in this class. I get him now at 25. He can play the inside. He's done that historically for USC, but also this year got some experience at that offensive tackle spot as well. This gives the Jaguars a little bit of flexibility if they want to move on from Andrew Norwell and cut him, save quite a bit of money on their salary cap. They could slot Vera Tucker there in at guard, or they could also play him at tackle to replace Cam Robinson. I think that versatility is going to be very vital for the Jacksonville Jaguars moving forward as they look to improve this football team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they will look along that offensive line. Something that is a little interesting, Urban Meyer said that this team has a really good offensive line. I don't know if that's a smokescreen. That's very possible that he actually firmly believes that. I'm not exactly sure, but he might be a little delusional in that sense. At pick 26, we have the Cleveland Browns. I think that they will look at that defensive line. If they don't end up landing J.J. Watt, I could see them going and drafting one. Jalen Phillips from the University of Miami is who I'm going to have selected. The Gregory Rousseau opt-out really opened the door for Jalen Phillips, who was a big-time transfer. And I think that ultimately Jalen Phillips has played himself into a first-round pick. He's gained a lot of traction in all of this pre-draft stuff. And for me personally, I could see them looking opposite of Myles Garrett to really get him some pass rush help.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a really good fit there as well, addressing that edge position. They could also be looking at linebacker as well. That's going to be really the two positions I see the Cleveland Browns working themselves through here at pick 26, but I think Jalen Phillips is a home run pick for them at 27, and actually would have been a player I'm looking at for the Baltimore Ravens at 27 with Jalen Phillips off the board. Now I'm going to take a quick look at that edge position, and here I'm not sure if there's a guy I specifically love fitting into that Baltimore Ravens defense as much as I would have if Jalen Phillips was there. Now I'm going to be looking instead at the interior offensive line, and I'm actually going to opt for Wyatt Davis. I know this is a little high. He sustained an injury during the college football playoffs, but my reasoning why is this team is the only team since the 1960s to rush for over 190 yards a game for the last 2 seasons, and they are a very run-centric football team, and they're going to continue to use that as their identity, and Wyatt Davis is the best offensive lineman in this class at helping them continue to succeed in that area. Orlando Brown, he might be on his way out. They've got some offensive line question marks, and like you said about good football teams, they address those positions before that they have issues there. And the Baltimore Ravens are going to be proactive in keeping that offensive line stout and beneficial for the way they run their offense.
Absolutely. I think that's, a really good selection considering that is the strength of their football team. And I know a lot of people for some reason really, really love the guards for the Ravens, but I don't think that, that's not worthy of taking a first round flyer on a guy like Wyatt Davis, who could be falling considering I think he was potentially a top 20 player in the class before that injury, but now he falls to 27. I don't know how much further he would fall if Baltimore didn't take him, but I think he is the best run blocker aside from Penei Sewell in the entire class. Love that selection. At pick 28, we have the New Orleans Saints. I think they're ready to load up on that wide receiver position. Terrace Marshall Jr. is the pick from LSU, a really, really big-time red zone threat for the New Orleans Saints. They have a lot of issues with the cap going into the offseason. They're going to have to do a ton of restructuring, a ton of cuts. So there could be some guys that are on their way out, but I feel like they do need another receiver aside from Michael Thomas. I know they have Emmanuel Sanders, but I think it's very possible he's a cap casualty. You got to have another guy to throw to. Terrace Marshall is a beast.
Yeah, Marshall stays in the state of Louisiana there as well. I like that hometown pick for the New Orleans Saints. And now looking at the Green Bay Packers, a team that maybe was hoping Marshall would be there for them at 29. He goes off the board. This turns me to looking at the cornerback position for them, and I'm actually going to opt for Eric Stokes out of Georgia. His stock's taken a little bit of a hit recently, but I think it's very possible he could stick into the back end of the first round, especially with this cornerback needy range here between 28 and 30. And for the Green Bay Packers, I think it's pretty obvious looking back at the NFC Conference Championship game. We saw Kevin King get picked on time after time after time. Tom Brady and the Buccaneers took advantage of that matchup. The Green Bay Packers need to improve across from Jair Alexander, and Eric Stokes has a real chance at being another man-to-man corner that fits right in there in Green Bay.
Absolutely. I love that pick for Green Bay, getting that outside true presence in Eric Stokes. At pick 30, I think that Zaven Collins is the pick for the Buffalo Bills, just considering that I think linebackers are arguably their biggest need. I think you could look at that cornerback spot. But for me personally, Zaven Collins is a really, really good linebacker for this team. I think he does a lot of different things well. He can defend against the run. He can play in pass coverage, but I think his biggest strength is just being that really, really secure guy that you can trust in the middle for this Buffalo Bills defense. Obviously, Sean McDermott loves drafting defensive players. You put him alongside of Edmonds, and that's going to be a dangerous duo.
Yeah, this board played out pretty well for them as well. Matt Milano is going to be testing free agency this offseason. He could be a guy that gets slightly overpaid in an open market as well with how he had played this recent year for Buffalo. I think Zaven Collins comes in, not only replaces him, but is also an upgrade for them in the long term next to Tremaine Edmonds, like you had said. Now at pick 31, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're a little bit of an interesting situation as well. Wide receiver is a real position that I think that they're going to be looking at. But like I had said earlier, this position's really thinned out with how we've seen the board go so far. I also think that they're going to be looking along the offensive line, and I think they're going to actually opt for an offensive tackle at this point in Jalen Mayfield. I think he's the best offensive lineman still on the board at this point. Interior offensive line is maybe a bigger need for them, but Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, he could be coming back as well. I don't know the status of him yet, if he will be returning to the Kansas City Chiefs next season or not. But he had been a guy who had opted out for COVID relief support. Huge thank you to him for doing that. But the Chiefs, they're going to have some questions along that offensive line, especially after that Super Bowl performance.
Yeah, absolutely. They do need to look at that offensive line, whether it be this round or the next round. for them, I think they're going to be kind of monitoring that with almost all of their picks, who's available at that offensive line. But now we're moving on to 32 with the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that Shaq Barrett is in dangerous territory of leaving. So I think they're going to go with Joseph Osai at that edge spot, just considering that you have to be prepared to still, play to the strength of your defense, rush the passer, have another guy opposite of JPP. Free agency is really going to play into this selection. There's a lot of different moving parts for them. They could have to look at the wide receiver spot, interior defensive line, or that edge spot. But, I mean, it really depends on what they prioritize. I think Joseph Osai is going to be a really good filler for Shaq Barrett.
Right. It's all about the salary cap, like you mentioned. And now moving into pick 33, the start of the second round here, we are looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the guy that's going to be the pick for them is Trevon Merrick. He is the top safety in the class. He fills their biggest positional need, in my opinion. We've already addressed the offensive line. We addressed the QB position. We come in and get Merrick here at 33.
Yeah, love that pick of Merrick there. They definitely need a safety. At pick 34, we have the New York Jets. There's a lot of different places that they can go. I think we have to once again look at that edge spot or possibly corner. I would prefer corner, though. I do think that's the bigger need ultimately for them. Asante Samuel Jr. is going to have to be the pick for them because they do not have enough cornerback play for the New York Jets currently. Obviously, Asante Samuel Jr. is not going to be that number one, that true shutdown guy, but they definitely have to add some bodies into that secondary.
Yes, definitely. And now looking at the Miami Dolphins at 35, we've already addressed wide receiver. We addressed offensive tackle, and this board's played out so great for them. They get Travis Etienne, a guy who is maybe the top running back in the class a little bit earlier in the year. He comes now to us at pick 35. Miami's much improved their offense. They get a pass-catching running back. They get a guy who can function as a runner as well, and I really like this for Miami.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's a great pick, and he really fell to them. At pick 36, we have the Atlanta Falcons. I think it's pretty clear that they're going to go with Azeez Ojulari. Edge is arguably their biggest need right now. Obviously, they don't necessarily need that quarterback, but for the long term, they do need a quarterback. But coming back with Azeez Ojulari, who was a first-round pick for a lot of the year, now is very possibly slipped into that second round. I think this is good value for them at 36.
Yeah, again, they stay in the state of Georgia for that selection. At 37, we got the Cincinnati Bengals here, and I'm going to opt for Alex Leatherwood. We didn't grab an offensive tackle in round one, but this is the reason why. It's a pretty deep tackle class. You can come grab a good one here at pick 37 and protect Joe Burrow moving forward in this direction.
Yep, absolutely. I love that pick. They do have to get a tackle for sure. Now we're moving on to the Eagles. I think they have to look at that cornerback spot for sure. You want to continue to improve that defense. Aaron Robinson out of UCF would be the selection, just considering that they do need to clean up the back half. They definitely had their fair share of struggles as a whole in the secondary last year. You come back with Aaron Robinson.
Yeah, I really like that there for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm looking at the Detroit Lions here at 39. Grab the QB to build around moving forward. This is one of the harder spots, in my opinion, to mock. I'm actually just going to stick with Dylan Radins here out of NDSU. You're going to grab a tackle. Look at a really long-term rebuild here. Dan Campbell talked about how they're going to be patient in this rebuild. I think grabbing a guy who could develop into a real quality starting NFL tackle in Radins makes a lot of sense. He's going to fit around who they grabbed at pick 7 as well. And I think this is a good direction for the Detroit Lions.
I love the pick of Radins. I think that really makes a lot of sense for them. At pick 40, I think Carolina fans would agree with me that they need to address that offensive line, especially the offensive tackle spot. Tevin Jenkins is the pick for me, just considering that is probably their biggest need right now. Personally, who knows if they're going to have some of these picks if they make a move for Deshaun Watson, but assuming that they don't go out and get him, I think Tevin Jenkins is a wonderful fit here.
Yeah, definitely. And at pick 41, I got the Denver Broncos. I'm actually going to maybe go a little bit out of order here. I'm going to grab Quincy Roche out of Miami. I think he's going to fly up boards a little bit as we get closer. And I think he fits into that Denver defense a little bit better than some of the other options on the board at this point. And for Quincy Roche to go 41 to the Denver Broncos, you get a replacement to Von Miller. You get someone who's going to be able to generate pressure off the edge. We saw that at Miami this past year and the year prior. He had been a little bit earlier in some of our other mock drafts. He's fallen down boards, but I think he sticks around 41 here at this point.
I think he's quickly becoming one of the most underrated prospects in the draft. Was extremely productive before he transferred to Miami. Now we have the Dallas Cowboys. I think it's all about the interior defensive line for them. Christian Barmore is going to be the pick from the University of Alabama. They are going to be looking for another presence up the middle. They drafted Neville Gallimore last year. They come back with Christian Barmore this season.
Yeah, I really like that. Barmore, one of the better players in the class. I think that he's being a little bit slept on as well for what he's going to bring to the table for an NFL roster. At 43, I've got the New York Giants yet again. We addressed that wide receiver position, and I'm actually going to grab Nick Bolton here, the linebacker out of Missouri. I think that they need someone across from Blake Martinez there in that defense. I think that that's the strongest player left on the board at this point. I think the New York Giants are going to be focused on just building up this roster, grabbing best player available when they can, and Nick Bolton is, at this point, in my opinion, the best player on the board.
Yeah, love that pick for the New York Giants. They want to address that second level of the defense. Now for the San Francisco 49ers, I think they will look at the interior O-line for sure. Creed Humphrey is the pick. Gives you some versatility. He can play center. He can play guard. And for San Francisco, once again, they're another one of those teams that loves to build up the trenches for sure, both offense and defense. I think they come back with a guy like Creed Humphrey.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And the Los Angeles Chargers are going to be actually sticking to that same game plan here about improving that offensive line. Grabbed Rashaan Slater in round 1. Here they're going to grab Landon Dickerson out of the University of Alabama. And my reasoning there is you're going to have to keep Justin Herbert healthy. He had to make a lot of throws this last year under duress. I think that they're going to look at improving that offensive line in any way that they can. They also lost their starting center in Marquise Pouncey, and now they get to improve this way with Landon Dickerson.
Absolutely. I think that they will for sure look at that interior offensive line. So they go back-to-back offensive linemen. That's really interesting. Now for Jacksonville with that Minnesota selection, I think they will look for sure at Pat Freiermuth, because we don't know the status of Tyler Eifert moving into next season. It's very possible that they don't bring him back after this season concludes. So they have to be ready for that. And Josh Oliver is not the tight end of the future. I don't think. He's had a lot of issues with injuries. I don't see that happening. Pat Freiermuth is the selection.
Yeah, Freiermuth could be a really nice addition there for Jacksonville. You see them addressing a weapon for their franchise QB Trevor Lawrence, and I like that fit a lot there in Jacksonville. At 47, the New England Patriots are here. Maybe they were hoping Pat Freiermuth would have fallen to them. He does not, however, though, in this mock draft. And instead, we're going to be looking along the interior defensive line, and we're actually going to opt for Jay Tufele out of USC. He's going to be that nose tackle presence for the New England Patriots. I think that is a very big need for them moving forward. Just guys that they've had there in the past, Lawrence Guy, Danny Shelton, that just doesn't get the job done here in the NFL. Jay Tufele is going to come in and be an instant presence for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jay Tufele is another guy that's being a little undervalued now all of a sudden because he was an opt-out this season. And it's hard to kind of remember the season prior just because you haven't seen him for a full season. Now with Arizona, they're going to come back with the corner. I am almost sure of it. They have to get a corner with this pick. I believe that with the corners that are available, I think they would opt to go with a guy like Tyson Campbell from Georgia. I do believe he is the best corner available for what is there currently. Ultimately, Arizona needs to address that cornerback position, just considering Patrick Peterson's getting older. They have Byron Murphy, but outside of that, there's not much there.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at Las Vegas here at pick 49, I'm going to stick along the interior defensive line here and go Levi Owunzurike out of Washington. I know they just officially signed David Irving from their practice squad. However, I don't think that is a serious move that's going to impact how they look at this draft here. Levi Owunzurike is going to be a guy who could impact the middle of that defense. They need to get more pressures. They need to have an improved defensive front, and he's going to go a long way in helping them in those areas.
A guy here at 54 Miami that was considered a consensus first-round pick last year, that was Dylan Moses. I think that Brian Flores gets his guy, really get to address that the defensive side of the ball. I think this is a very, very underrated prospect now as we move forward in the NFL draft process. Really athletic linebacker, and I think he fits in nicely.
Yeah, I really like that for Miami, and I think that right now at this point with their 4 picks in the top 50, they're absolutely killing this draft at this point. They've addressed every position of need. I think that they've gotten quality players at those positions of need as well that fit in with their system. I really like Miami's draft up to this point. At 51, I got the Washington football team here. Question marks at the offensive tackle spot and at wide receiver are the 2 places I am really looking now at this point. Offensive tackle, I don't necessarily love what's on the board. I'd maybe look at Jackson Carman here, but I'm not certain on that. I'm actually going to opt for Chatarius Atwell out of Louisville. I think he's a guy who's going to fly up boards a little bit too as we get closer to the NFL draft. I think he could play himself into a maybe mid to early second-round pick. If things keep going right for him, and I think Washington at 51 is a good landing spot for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good spot for him. They do need to address that wide receiver position. Now we have Chicago here. They do need offensive line. They could use a wide receiver. Let's go to that interior offensive line and see what is currently available for them to be able to take. Trey Smith is one of the more undervalued prospects, once again, at this point in the draft. I think that is the selection there. There are some people that do believe that Trey Smith is a for sure first-round lock for that, But me personally, I'm not sure I see it the same way. I think it's very possible that he falls. But Chicago, once again, comes back and gets another offensive lineman.
Yeah, and at 53, I got the Indianapolis Colts, and this is going to be the motto there in Indianapolis for the GM, Chris Ballard, and for head coach Frank Reich. Everything we do is in the best interest of Carson Wentz. They went and grabbed a tackle to protect him. Now they're going to come back, grab Rondale Moore as a pass-catching option for him. They need to find a way to replace T.Y. Hilton this offseason. He is a free agent. He's 32 years old. I just don't really see him coming back to Indianapolis on a long-term situational deal. I think that if he does come back, it'll be a short-term deal. And even then, I don't think that they're counting on him to be a real contributor moving forward. I think Rondale Moore is the right selection at this point for the Colts.
Absolutely. And at pick 54, we have the Tennessee Titans, who I think they will look at that wide receiver position. However, I think they will prioritize the interior defensive line with Davion Nixon from Iowa, a guy, once again, that's gained a ton of traction since the season has ended. I think that he will continue to ascend up boards, but for Tennessee, it's all about improving that front seven.
Yeah, I definitely think so as well. And a team that's looking to improve their offensive line, the Seattle Seahawks here, Russell Wilson's putting a lot of pressure on them to look at that position. However, I don't actually see them going that way. I see them staying in state here with Joe Tryon, a guy out of Washington, second defensive lineman from Washington we've had go here in the second round. Edge has been a really big positional need for them for the last 3 or 4 years now at this point. They try and hit here again with Joe Tryon out of Washington. I know offensive tackle is a big need. I know interior offensive lineman is a big need. However, I don't think that they move on from Joe Tryon here at 55.
At pick 56, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's very possible that they look at Javonte Williams from North Carolina. I think for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are going to move on from James Conner. I don't feel like they're ready to move forward at that running back position without selecting one. I think Javonte Williams is arguably the best available running back at this spot. And I think Kenneth Gainwell is another guy they will consider strongly here.
Yeah, I really love Javonte Williams. He's one of my favorite players in the class to watch, and I think he's a great fit there in Pittsburgh. Saves them some money as well on the salary cap situation. At 57, we got the Los Angeles Rams. This is their first pick of the NFL draft. Obviously, their pick got traded out to the Jacksonville Jaguars in a deal for Jalen Ramsey. So now they have to look at improving this team, and they're going to look at the offensive tackle as a spot to do that. Andrew Whitworth, he's probably not going to be back, so they're going to opt for Jackson Carman here. He's a guy who can grow into an NFL-level tackle pretty quickly in his career. He had protected Trevor Lawrence for the past couple of years, and now he's going to be going to the Los Angeles Rams to protect newly invested Matthew Stafford.
Now here at 58, I think we have one of the more interesting picks in the second round. We have the Cleveland Browns. I think they are prepared possibly to move on from Odell Beckham Jr. And if we can look at that wide receiver position real quick just to see who we have available, I think Tylan Wallace is the pick. I think that he's another player that is being undervalued, and there's a lot of people that think he could be a third or fourth round pick, but I see him more in that second round range. But I think Cleveland is ready to move on possibly from OBJ. We'll have to kind of see what kind of package they could get for him.
Yeah, definitely. And now moving into their division rival, the Baltimore Ravens, I had talked about edge as a positional need for them in round one. They weren't able to grab one that I liked that fit into their system. And now at 59, I'm actually going to go with Victor Dimukeje out of Duke. I know his rank says 96, but I think he's going to be a guy that plays himself up boards. He's versatile. He plays with heart. He plays really downhill really quickly, and I think he fits perfectly into that Matthew Judon role. He's going to be a guy that leaves Baltimore, and Dimukeje is going to be able to come in, replace him immediately, and bring in some production as well at that position.
Absolutely. I love that fit there. At pick 60, we have the New Orleans Saints, and because they are so strapped for cash, that's going to cause them to go with Javon Holland, actually from Oregon. At one point was considered the top safety. I think Trayvon Merrick has proven that he is a better safety, but for them, Marcus Williams is in his, he is a current free agent. I don't see them bringing him back at the number he's going to command.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a good solution there for their cap issues. That's going to be a big motivating factor for them all draft long here, grabbing Javon Holland now at 60. At 61, the Green Bay Packers, they're looking at that wide receiver position. I mentioned that earlier. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a guy here on the table, but I actually don't like that direction for them. I think they're going to go Nico Collins out of Michigan. Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to function more as a red zone threat, and they have the history of running all those little dig routes with Devontae Adams and obviously really relying on that tight end position in the end zone. I think Nico Collins is a better fit for them moving the ball from 20 to 20.
Absolutely. I agree completely. Now looking at Buffalo, I think that they could once again look at that cornerback spot. I'm going to have Shaun Wade finally go here at 62, a guy that was projected to be a top 15 pick before the year. There's a lot of reasons why there was issues for him during the season, but some of these guys did not adjust well to the COVID season. Obviously, Ohio State had a late start. There's a lot of motivating factors to why, he could be lower on boards. But, I mean, he did not play super well this year. You're going to kind of bank on a bounce back rookie season for him.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Buffalo is a great spot for him too. Sean McDermott's going to get the best out of his players there in Buffalo. At 63, the Kansas City Chiefs, I had mentioned wide receiver for them in round 1. They didn't pull the trigger then, but they are going to now on Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's going to give them a little bit of different versatility, not necessarily what you think of when you think Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver, but I think that they're going to look at balancing out their offense a little bit more, give them a red zone threat, maybe set up a little bit more of a run identity, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to help them in both of those areas.
And finally, we conclude with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to have you go to the interior defensive line to kind of see what we do have available for them. Just considering that I think Ndamukong Suh might not be back at this point. I think of the available players, I think Tyler Shelvin is probably the best available defensive lineman at this point in a very, very tough LSU season. He did produce better than a lot of his counterparts on that defense. For me, ultimately, I think Tyler Shelvin is the pick.
I really like that there. Thank you guys so much for watching this NFL mock draft. Let us know in the comments below what team you think had the best mock draft here, and if there's any other situations you would like us to talk about moving forward when it comes to mock drafts. We also do a whole bunch of individualized team mock drafts, so let us know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next video.